Welcome to Not Your Parents' White Wines, Naked, Native, and Now, produced by the Wine Education Department, featuring the wines of Leonardo Lacasio Selections. At Winebow, our Wine Education Department is responsible for inspiring, equipping, and empowering you to be the best professional you can be. For almost 40 years, LLS has represented Italian wines of impeccable quality, character, and value. We can always depend on this branding, and we continue to push it forward in our marketplace. Once upon a time, wine drinkers preferred their whites full-bodied, oaky, buttery, but this trend fell out of fashion, as all trends must. The ABC movement, anything but Chardonnay, swept through America like a wildfire. People discovered the delights of Pinot Grigio, crisp, unoaked, refreshing. They learned that there was a whole country full of these wines, all of them fresh and unadorned, but each with its own particular charms. Italy had been waiting for the world to discover its panoply of delicious whites, and now that it had, there was no turning back. What Italy offered, unfortunately, was a whole bunch of grape varieties nobody had heard of, nor could they pronounce. But in exchange, they gave us white wines that showed no oak and were acidic and refreshing, which was exactly what the public is wanting now and what they transitioned from in the anything but Chardonnay movement. Interesting, that's exactly what Italy always offers. Interesting white wines. All kinds of things that excite your curiosity, that can absorb your interest. They can consume you with the search of another cool grape variety that starts with V, for instance. There's just so many things to explore here. This is one of the most enriching discussions of all wine when you start to talk about the diversity of Italy in either direction, red or white. Trebbiano di Lugana, also known as Verdicchio Bianca, as well as Trebbiano di Soave. It's a very old variety, probably originated in Veneto. It has the ability to be larger boned, although I would never call it rich like oaky Chardonnay. It has texture. It has a perfume to it. It has a really crisp finish. You can find it obviously in Verdicchio dei Castelli di Jesi, but you also find it in Lugana, the eponymous named region for this variety. What I really like about this also is that sort of bitter almond note that can be part of so many Italian white wines, partially from their cold soak and partially from their nature as grape varieties. It was probably introduced to Marche in the 15th century, so we know it's been around quite a while. It actually has a couple of other names that from history, Turbiana as well as Turbiano. Now we move into looking at the region. Lugana, as you see there on the south shore of Lake Garda, is a region that is known for some calcareous soils with loam. It is sort of uniquely maritime for an inland region because Lake Garda is large enough to actually give it that water influence. The soils there were the bottom of the ocean at one point, so there are seashells and there are calcareous deposits there that really benefit this particular grape variety in keeping it tart and refreshing. It is a white-specific appellation, so and it has to be centered on Lugana, Trebbiano di Lugana, also known as Verdicchio, as we have now discovered. There are 1,482 acres in this appellation, so it's not very large, and all of the whites have to be at least 90% of Trebbiano di Lugana. Zenato really leads the charge in this particular appellation, as we know from our own portfolio, and certainly their Lugana as well as their sparkling Lugana are outstanding wines. So between their two productions, you have Lugana and then you have Valpolicella and its iterations. The Zenato family has 75 hectares in San Benedetto di Lugana, so they have a large portion of the vineyard area. They are capable of making quite a lot of this wine, which is great because we can show this wine all over the place, and it deserves to be seen. It has an inherent likability in the U.S. market, which we'll get to in a moment. 1960, when Sergio Zenato sort of started to fulfill this dream, he built his winery and his idea of what should be done in Valpolicella and Lugana from there. And now, after his passing, his wife Carla and his children Alberto and Nadia are in charge of the winery, and they're doing a great job, always consistently among the most respected of their peers, as well as even in the international market. I think this wine is absorbing. It can fully take your attention. It's engrossing to a certain degree because it's unexpected. When you don't know anything about this wine and you try it for the first time, it definitely grabs your attention. So Lugana di San Benedetto is 100% Trebbiano di Lugana in this particular case. It is from the so-named vineyard for the DOC, and it's on the south shore of Lake Garda. We see here that it's this calcareous clay and loam soil, which helps to hold moisture. The clay holds moisture and makes sure that the vines have plenty of liquid to absorb, but it also offers a higher pH soil, which in turn drives pH down in the grape variety, which gives them the ability to make a richly textured but yet very crisp and refreshing white wine. And that is reflective also in the choice of stainless steel fermentation at cooler temperatures to make sure they don't lose the high tone aromatics and the crisp nature of the grape variety. This one ends up in all stainless steel. The alcoholic fermentation takes about 20 to 25 days. And you can expect this wine to be a little salty, a little subtle minerality, and almost, I often show this to people and say, just think Chardonnay without oak, and it gets them in the right frame of reference for texture and everything else. The wine's beautiful, certainly a wine to show lots of accounts, and I think that you'll find that a lot of people jump right in as they like it a lot. If you are taking this in preparation for our first iteration of this course, then you're going to taste the wines there. If not, hit pause right now and taste the wine so that you can get the impression, and then we'll move on. Passerina is our next grape. This is a really old variety as well, from the Adriatic coast of Italy. It's a very vigorous variety, which is great for antiquity, meaning that it produces a lot of grapes and produces a lot of vines. In modern times, we can control that a little bit and get them tamed into something of higher quality. So it's grown throughout central Italy. It's blended often with Pecorino and Trebbiano Toscano in Falerio de Colli Ascolani. You'll also see it made by itself in Ofida, in the Contraghera DOC in the province of Teramo in Abruzzo. It's authorized on its own or part of a blend. You'll see this almost exclusively as a still dry varietal, but you know the Italians, they'll make just about anything out of every grape because that way they can stay regional. In this particular case, we're only exploring the dry still white version of it. What can you expect out of it? You know, apples, pears, slightly bitter finish, that sort of very classic white wine of Italy that is both refreshing and cutting. It's really awesome with food because it sort of becomes what you need instead of standing out on its own. So this is from Abruzzo, and you'll see there in the center of the map to the right, Chieti, which is sort of now the center of production for the region, where a lot of the facilities are, but it's not where all the grapes are grown. They're grown all over the place. And Abruzzo is a fascinating region that as you look away from the sea, you're looking at a mountain that has snow on it nearly year-round. You can ski in the morning and then go jump in the ocean in the afternoon. It is a very diverse region due to altitude as well as rolling hills, and then all the way down into having fully maritime effect of the Adriatic Sea. It was dominated for a very long time by cooperatives and kind of bulk production, because as we got through the Depression and the Second World War, this was a very poor area and it was sparsely settled for a little while. And then as they revitalized the area, it was step one was to start grape and wine production all over again for more than just daily consumption, and then to move to the next quality step. And now they are on the cusp, and many are producing wines of world-class quality. And we now have the pride and joy of being able to show those kinds of wines to the U.S. market through both our Chicha friends as well as a couple of other wineries that we make. Ferzo is one of the Chicha family wines. It is an homage to the patchwork of vineyards and family lines that are what Chicha depends on to make great wines. Ferzo is a line that has more than just Passerina, but we're going to look at the Passerina. Cotorella is their consulting winemaker, and so we know in advance that it's going to be amazing. In the background there, you see the mountain which I referred to at 9,500 feet above sea level. Gran Sasso is its name, and as you can tell, that's going to be heavily influential over the landscape. Note the rolling hillsides, the patchwork of vineyards and olive trees. It's rich in agriculture and viticulture. So, fascinating. I agree with this for Passerina. I find Passerina to be fascinating. Not a grape you hear a lot about, certainly very unique in its singular production, meaning as a varietal in Abruzzo. One of those wines that you can easily put in front of a geek like me and get their attention. It's like, oh, that's different. I haven't seen that in a while or even before. And that fascination can certainly turn into orders. So the Passerina IGP Terre de Chieti from Ferzo is what we're tasting at this point. They also are blessed with calcareous clay soils based on Abruzzo being under the ocean at one point. You can expect this wine to have that really beautiful directness of stainless steel fermentation. They do a little pre-fermentation cold soak, I think it's 9 hours, which extracts some of the aromatics of the skins and gives it that slightly almond bitterness, a little bit of white wine tannin that really aids in the food friendliness of this wine. So if you have the wine in front of you because you're doing this later in life and you're not part of our original offering of this course, then hit pause right now and give a taste and decide how you want to use this wine in your market. Otherwise, let's just keep moving. So now we're on to Arneis. Arneis is a fantastic white wine grape varietal from Piemonte. It has its own DOCG in Roero, and really interestingly, almost didn't exist in today's world. It had gone out of favor completely, even though in the past it was planted alongside of Nebbiolo, either for blending purposes, and some say that it was planted beside them so that the birds would smell this grape, which is a little more aromatic, and come and pick on it first and allow the Nebbiolo to ripen. But it was also there used sort of like Viognier is used was used in Northern Rhone to blend with Syrah. Arneis was actually blended into Nebbiolo in antiquity. You should expect this wine to be unoaked in general, although there are some examples of oaked Arneis, and they can be quite lovely. My personal preferred style is the leaner, more crisp and stainless steel driven version, but they all have their place in the world. You should expect it to have ripe pear, and if it's not handled well, it isn't popping with acidity. But in general, the wines that I've tasted over the last 5 to 7 years coming from Piemonte made from this grape tend to focus in on keeping it crisp, keeping it delightful, and then offering as much flavor as the grape will allow inside that environment. So as we're moving into this, we obviously need to look at where it's from. Roero is perhaps better known for its whites, which is great because this is the hotbed of Arneis these days. But it also makes Nebbiolo and Barbera and a few other things in the same region. But we're just going to concentrate on what's going on with the white wines. It's a patchwork of soils. Roero's not a singular soil like some regions. You'll find sand, you'll find clay, you'll find loam, you'll find a fair amount of calcareous material even in the sand, as that is sort of the nature of Piemonte across the board. Roero, actually, as mentioned before, is a DOCG for Nebbiolo as well as Arneis, and this is really the signature region for this grape, so you definitely want to keep this on your radar. Thankfully, we have a producer, as we always should, from the great places of the world, and so we're going to talk about that specifically as we move on. So, Monchiero Carbone is our producer from Rero. There's a really wonderful family history here. It is the brainchild of Marco Monchiero, as he came back, already well known for his winemaking. He came back home to his hometown, for lack of a better description, found this beautiful house and bought it, because the huge advantage was that it was an extensive wine cellar underneath the house. And then he started his vision of owning his own property and making his own wines. As time moved on, Marco and his wife Luchetta Carbone brought together two families of winemaking, and in that process takes them back historically into the early 1900s as a winemaking family. So they have plenty of history and experience to lean on, as is sort of the norm in Italy, to have all of this background history that's associated with winemaking. They finally started production in this facility in 1990, and the results have been great ever since. They have this light, sandy, and calcareous soil from Tenon, which is particularly great for the Arneis, and that's where this wine that we're going to talk about comes from. Francesco Carbone also was known as Cecco della Bionda, son of Ricu the Blonde, and who transmitted to his grandson Francesco Monchiero a feeling of pride and an attachment to the country values. And since he's now running the estate, Francesco decided to express his gratitude to his grandfather to name one of the Rero Arneises after him, which is the Cecco bottling, which you can certainly pull out. And actually, one of the things that is really awesome is to have the Cecco and the Recit right next to each other and taste them with people. They have different purposes. One you can definitely use as a glass pour situation. The other one's a great bottle list wine, or to have a separation of intensity on a retail shelf for sure. I certainly find the wines of Monchiero Carbone engaging. They draw my attention. I admit I regularly buy these wines for my personal purchase to drink at home. My wife and I both love them, so I guess I'm fully engaged. So, Recit Rero Arneis from Monchiero Carbone. Recit means little king. This comes from the sandy clay loam soils. They do this in cold stainless steel fermentation. They really do a great job of maintaining the crisp and refreshing side of Arneis. It has this beautiful, I wouldn't go so far as to say waxy texture, but there's almost a savory nature to the texture of this wine, while it is very bright and refreshing on the other sides. It offers just a smidge of aromatics, white flower petals. Some people might say honeysuckle, but if you use that, I would say that use it as a very light essence, not certainly like standing next to a honeysuckle bush. This is just beautiful. So give it a try if you're doing this presentation on your own. If you're preparing to come to the course, then we'll just keep moving. Hit pause if you're ready to try the wine. We're now moving to Sicily, and we're going to do Grillo. This is an interesting grape variety that actually been around a while, but not as long as some of the others. It is a natural cross between Catarratto Bianco and Zebibo, which is the Sicilian name for Muscat of Alexandria. So given those two parents, one would expect that there's some aromatics to this grape variety, and Catarratto brings the cut, the acidity, the linear nature to the grape, and obviously the Muscat of Alexandria brings the rich profile, the tropical fruit side, as well as the aromatics that are offered by this grape variety. It tends to be medium bodied. It can be a little herbaceous and floral for sure, and it really what you get out of this wine is based on where you grow it, and what's beautiful about our example of it is that it's grown in upper elevated vineyards that give it a chance to stay crisp and refreshing. All right, here's your map of Sicily, the triangle as we often refer to it. You can see here that grapes are grown all over the island. There are certainly, it's a playground for vineyards for sure, because you have everything from nearly North African warmth and low elevation next to the sea, and then you can have snow-capped Mount Etna all on the same day. Every place that you go, you're basically choosing whether you want a full maritime influence or whether you want elevation influence, and sometimes you get both. And that is one of the beauties of Sicily, is that while it is nearly subtropical, you have enough elevation that you can struggle to ripen grapes in certain places. It's one of the oldest wine regions. It was actually probably first planted by the Greeks when they were there, when they were making the colonies of Magna Graecia. It was originally, as one would think, for its warmth and its ability to ripen grapes with just barely enough rainfall and lots of sunshine. It was originally known for raisinated sweet wines as well as fortified wines. But as modern winemaking has come into play, as well as modern taste profiles, the island has moved more and more towards traditional, what we now consider traditional dry styles. But if you're Italian and you're looking at 5,000 years of history, traditional would have been the opposite. 2,500 years of winemaking on this island. Tasca d'Almarita is one of the most important and highest quality producers in Sicily. They're a large wine concern, but they don't taste like it per se. They have great resources, they have wonderful winemaking techniques, and they have the ability to make levels of wine, which is really awesome because it allows you to show people what fits into their program when you are talking to them as a salesperson. They own 5 different estates across the islands. Their home estate is the Regaliali estate in the heart of the family's wine production. But they also have the Capofaro on Salina in the Aeolian Islands. They have Tascante on Mount Etna. They have Whitaker on Mosia in the province of Trapani, and Salier de la Tour in the DOC Monreale area. So they have it covered. You can go to them and get what you need from Sicily. Intriguing, yes, I think Grillo is intriguing. I think all of Sicilian winemaking right now is intriguing. There's so much going on there. They're the most progressive, I think, of what's going on in Italy because they have less entrenched traditions. And there's definitely a lot of fascinating things going on there. So this is Grillo Cavallo delle Fate Sicilia, or Sicilia, I suppose. It is grown at 1,980 feet above sea level. So this gives it an opportunity to get those cooling breezes coming out of altitude, to avoid the oppressive heat that can happen in Sicilia down at sea level, and allows them to take stainless steel and ferment this grape and bring out the best of it. And when you do that, you're going to end up with wines that have that pop of aromatics, that little bit of flower petal, that little bit of savory spice perhaps, followed by a linear, refreshing side. Really great food wine. Just imagining this wine with traditional southern Italian food of maybe olives and olive oils and tomato-based things just makes me smile. All right, so if you are doing this on your own and you have the wine in front of you, hit pause and give it a try and think about where you can use this in the market. And if you are prepping for our course together, then you can just keep moving. Fiano. Fiano is a very old variety from Campania. It has been revitalized by Maestro Berardino back in the 1970s as he and his family dedicated themselves to not allowing the Campania to lose its heritage, not moving down the path that other regions of the world had done where, well, the world wants Cabernet and Chardonnay, so let's plant that. One of the things I adore about Italy in general is they resisted that movement and always have, that no, we have our own grapes, we believe in our own grapes, and we should grow our own grapes and make wines that we believe in. And that's one of the great things that Italy has done over the last century as we moved into modern winemaking, that I hope every region of the world actually follows suit. So Fiano is a textured white wine. It's not that it lacks refreshment, but it has a richness that is very pleasurable. And that's one of the things that makes it attractive in the world today, as people are looking for that anything but Chardonnay, that unoaked white that still makes them happy with texture. Fiano is a fantastic option for that. We actually see this variety mentioned in the year 1240 in a register of purchases by Emperor Frederick II. And we know it's probably older than that, but we see that actually written down. So Campania is centered around Naples, Napoli, and we see it here on the map with its various regions. And Avellino, as you see listed there in the Irpinia DOC area, is the area that is all about Fiano. It's not that Fiano isn't made outside of that area, but that's its resurrected home, thanks to the work of Maestro Berardino and others. And what's interesting about Campania is we think of it as this volcanic soil-dominated region, thanks to Vesuvius and the eruptions that happen throughout time. And there is plenty of volcanic material throughout Campania, but what's surprising is based on ocean movements, etc., and the rising and falling of land, there's actually quite a bit of calcareous soil mixed in with these regions. And when we run across that, we get the blessings of lowering the pH in grapes and creating white wines in what is essentially a warm maritime climate until you get into elevation that are crisp and refreshing. So your magical combinations here are, it's not that volcanic doesn't make good white wine, it's just that now you have both options. And as you wander through Campania, your blessings are either the ameliorating effects of the Tyrrhenian Sea or the ameliorating effects of altitude. Either one works great so that you can find a spot to grow white grapes that make refreshing white wine. So Maestro Berardino takes a region with a history that has been run by the Greeks, the Romans, and the Byzantines, and an enormous depth of history, winemaking here for thousands of years, and brings it into the modern era along with some of his neighbors. But certainly he and his family have solidified their place in the world through their singular efforts, saving things like Fiano from extinction, resurrecting the reputation of Aglianico in Taurasi, and just leading the charge as being one of the best wineries in Italy and world renowned for both whites and red wines. So we are very proud to have them in our book, as I hope you all are. I think these wines can be absolutely riveting. Maestro Berardino wines catch your attention, and I love Fiano. I have for a very long time. I started with the grape, it's almost 20 years ago now. When I first found it, I said, this wine has to be poured by the glass. It's great with food. It's a great alternative for people looking for something new that like Chardonnay. And it's not that it tastes like Chardonnay. It really doesn't. And so I don't want to give you that impression. So much about it is that it's the texture. So often people are not so addicted to the actual flavor profile of wine as they are the texture or the crispness or the simplicity of the elegance of it. I mean, the reason people love Pinot Grigio so much is that it's predictable and it's enjoyable without having a lot of thought. The reason people like Chardonnay so much is the obvious natures of the fruit and the texture. Those are things that are easily latched onto. And when we move to wines like Fiano d'Avellino, we give them similar ideas, in the idea that we give them 2 or 3 fruits they can latch onto and a texture that is very pleasurable. So here we have Radici, Fiano d'Avellino from Maestro Berardino. And this wine is exactly what you're supposed to get from Fiano. It has that rich texture. It has the malic tree fruits driven a lot by pear. It runs into the idea a little bit of orange or tangerine, and yet doesn't feel heavy. and it certainly doesn't feel like it doesn't have a crisp side. It has all of it, and which is really remarkable. Radici means roots, and so that term is on these labels to remind us that this is the root. These grapes are the roots of all of the region, and Maestro Rodino is dedicated to them. This is from 1,815 feet above sea level. So you're here, they're using the advantage of elevation to keep it pure and keep it refreshing. Fiano can ripen to a level that it has tremendous richness, and this one has moderated that into kind of an ideal balance. So let's give it a taste. If you're doing this presentation on your own, hit pause and do that. Otherwise, we're going to move on for those of you who are prepping for the live presentation that's coming soon. We're going to move on to the grape Vermentino, one of the many V's. Always interesting to me from a student perspective that so many of the Italian grape varietals that are white start with V. Vermentino, Verdicchio, Vernaccia, which I think is very confusing to the outside world, and so we have to help them with that. But this one actually is a synonym, as many of the Italian varietals have synonyms with Favorita and Pigatto. It is most likely from Piedmont, but it actually had its greatest plantings, and still does, on the island of Corsica, or Corse. It is most thought of for Italian wines, oddly enough, on Sardinia instead of on the mainland. Yes, you'll find it in Bulgari and Tuscany to some degree, but certainly its fame and fortune, if we can call it that, considering it still isn't one of the most common grapes people think of, is on the island of Sardinia. I love this wine for its little bit of a spritzy, floral, refreshing side in most cases, and it's just another one of those really awesome things to show people, like, here's another crisp, delicious wine that you may not have heard of that happens to be from Italy. So you're basically looking back, 13th, 14th century, it was already entrenched in Corsica. So, and then it sort of spread back to Italy from there. So here we have Sardinia, also known as Sardinia. It's the second largest island in the Mediterranean. It's only slightly smaller than Sicily. It's 150 miles off the west coast of mainland Italy. So there's definitely some distance here, enough that it really kind of has its own culture. It was controlled by the French at one point. It was controlled by the Spaniards at one point. The natives would retreat up into the hills and let whoever wanted to run the coastlines, and then they'd come back down when they left. And actually, it was the Spaniards who brought Garnacha to the island, and that became known on the island as Canonau, because they reminded themselves of how often the Spaniards fired their cannons, and they left them this red grape behind. Very charming little story. So it was very likely the French coming from Corsica that brought Vermentino to the island, and Gallura up in the north is the home of Vermentino di Gallura, the only DOCG on the island, and it deserves it. This is a really great white wine, and it's a reminder that while the DOCG status is often elite pricing as well, not always, because Vermentino di Gallura is a really lovely, affordable, delicious wine that we can sell at that top tier of the Italian wine law echelon without top tier pricing. And Argiolas is the most well-known and largest producer on this island. They make just a boatload of great wines. They love to use their local grape varieties. They have all kinds of sustainable practices in both pest management, precise irrigation. They do crop rotations. They have soil erosion prevention measures. They have a very careful and calculated methodology in the way they manage their soils by inoculating with microorganisms, and they prune in a particular way that allows an even a more holistic approach to it's called the Simonite and search pruning method, and basically it shapes the structure of the vine to live within its environment in a more holistic manner. They have 11 different traditional cultivars, including Vermentino, and it just gives you this wonderful playscape of the entire island when you talk about Argiolas. Unfortunately, we're going to have to narrow our discussion to just the Vermentino, but they have plenty of other things to discuss and you should explore. Again, Vermentino often ends up in my personal purchase. I love to have this wine at home. It works with all kinds of things on the table, and it definitely catches my attention. It's caught my wife's attention on several occasions, such that she says, "When are you going to put that in our personal purchase again?" So, like I mentioned before, it's really great to have a wine that can get your attention this quickly that is not expensive, and that is a huge advantage for us. I think the Costamolino, which we're going to explore now, is one of the inherently glass pour driven awesome whites of Italy. I see it regularly done this way in restaurants, and I'm really happy about that, because it gives me a glass of wine that I'm really excited about drinking when I go in. And I know I'm not every customer, but I think most customers will like this. I think this wine, for the person who really loves Pinot Grigio, awesome. For the person who likes Sauvignon Blanc and is looking at an Italian wine, awesome. It really has this ability to act like some other grapes that people are now comfortable with. Albarino comes to mind. Anyway, there's a little small portion of this wine that goes under malolactic transformation, and I think that's a beautiful thing, because on its own, Vermentino is fairly lean and not rich in texture. But if you go and you allow some of that wine to go through malo, then you add some texture to the wine that makes it feel like texturally like wine that's been in oak, but this has not been in oak. It is very Mediterranean in its style, and they're leaving just that little bit of CO2 dissolved in the wine for this makes it give that sort of spritz across the tongue. Really great example of the grape variety. So give this a try if you're working on this on your own, and if not, we'll move on for those of you who are prepping to show up and do this live. So what do we want to take away from here? If nothing else, we want to know that when we leave here, we have a wealth of crisp, delicious white wines made from indigenous varieties in the LLS portfolio that are both interesting and desirable to the public at large today. We have to make them comfortable with the fact that it's a grape they may not have heard of, but as soon as they taste it, they're like, oh man, this is exactly what I was looking for. It fulfills the desire easily for our customer base out there that's looking for the modern wine flavor in white wine. It's not that Chardonnay is dead, but there are so many people out there looking for the other side of white wine, and we have it for them. We have it for them in multiple regions, multiple grape varieties, and multiple producers, and that's a really great luxury. Don't forget to fill out your survey. There will be attached to this presentation in the corkboard where you're finding it. You're going to find the survey that you need to fill out to prove that you took this survey on your own. For those of you doing this as pre-work before the live presentation, make sure you fill it out, because there will be a report going to your management that says you either did or did not do it within 24 hours of the actual presentation. Grazie mille. Have a great day.